So is he gonna teach him?
Once again, this is Tuesday, May 23rd. If your star is listening to this because you wanted to finish out the stories from Camp Tecumseh, welcome. It's good to have you. If you're just some random creepy person, welcome. Join the fun. And then we'll go through. If you are a random creepy person or a star, you might want to just fast forward the video until you start seeing a picture of cars up there, because I'm going to be talking about other things and it's probably not going to be as exciting for you. Or you can just listen to my melodic voice. I'm happy with any of that. And we'll kick back into the stories in a second. With Wagley, he will be here all day on Thursday to come back, and he's going to participate in field day, and he'll be here giving out the awards and things like that, but he won't be teaching. He's just going to be here to hang out and listen. Much like Mr. Foley, my cadet teacher, who's normally here in the afternoons, he gets a chance to come back and just sort of hang out. Wagley wrote me a letter before he left, and part of it applies to you guys, and it sort of connects to the story from yesterday. And so I wanted to read part of his letter to you guys. I asked him for permission first. The first part of it I'm not going to get into just because it talks about me, and I think it's vain for me to talk about how awesome I am, because I already know how awesome I am. But he gets into the idea of his thoughts on teaching, which connects more to you guys. So that's what I jumped to. It says, "To truly thank you, I should explain the direct impact you and the kids have had on me as a teacher. To put things in perspective of how much I've grown and changed this semester, to which you, all of you, credit is owed, I think it would help to first consider where I was before this semester began. The reason I even came into education in the first place was for the conversation. My junior year of high school, we started having these deep conversations about life and literature in my English classes, and that really struck my interest. I'm sure they were happening before then, but I was a bit of an introverted squirrel in middle school. Anyways, that's when I decided I wanted to teach, so I could create these conversations on my own and with students of my own. For the past 4 years at Ball State, I only saw myself teaching high school, and hopefully eventually going on and teaching college, because I thought what I was truly interested in was a conversation that could only be had with older students. I also believed I couldn't express my sense of humor or truly be myself with younger students. Of course, it turned out I was wrong. This is where you came in, and the kids came in. Because as soon as I watched you teach, everything about what I wanted to be as a teacher changed. Watching you teach was basically me looking at my list of priorities in life and laughing at how cosmically far off I was. Immediately after watching you teach, I realized multiple things about teaching, as well as myself. First of all, you most certainly can have intellectual conversations with younger students. It may just take more skill and practice from the teacher. Second, that conversation isn't the only thing I want as a teacher. In fact, it's moved pretty far down on my list of priorities. The thing that kicked this priority from way up top to way down low, in addition to kicking me in the face as soon as I started taking over, was connecting to kids. These kids. Not only did I realize how much the kids and I both needed it to really have a good teachy, learny relationship, I realized it's what we both want. Kids want to be in a classroom where their teacher's fun and cares about them. And teachers want to be fun. I mean, if they have anything more than a hard black lump of a heart, they can't help but care about all of these kids. That is what I saw from you and what I learned from you. And by far the most valuable thing I will take from me and from this experience. I could have spent the rest of my life at Ball State and never learned what I learned from you and from the kids, from the opportunities you gave me, and from watching you teach. No matter what age I go on to teach, what you have taught me will hold true. Students are human, whether it's 7th grade or 11th. The best thing I can do for them, no matter what, is give them a positive experience at school and be a positive person in their life. My big takeaway from that was giving credit to you guys. All I did was step back and guide him and try to get out of the way and point out the good things he was doing and the not good things. But you guys changed someone's life this past year, because he had no intention of teaching junior high. He was only placed here because he got put here, but it was not where he wanted to be until he spent time with you. And now he doesn't want to go anywhere else. He doesn't want to teach high school. He doesn't want to teach college because of his experience with you guys. And that says a lot. The fact that it goes back to my story yesterday about that guy in the hallway and that one small comment he made and the ripple effects from it, and the fact that it's something I still talk about to this day. Even though for you guys it was just sitting there having a student teacher and it was something you had to go through, you being you and being the good people you are, it had a ripple effect because it changed a person's life from someone who did not want to be in this experience to someone who only wants to have that experience. And that's something that gives you guys credit for it. So go you guys on that one. I was pretty happy when I read that and to give you guys credit for it. Now, enough about him and back to me. All right, to there. So that's, since he's coming back, I wanted to sort of share that with you guys. All right. Hey, look, cars, you can come back now. All right, and so let's see, back to the story from before. We jump to this one. This was the car I had in my senior year of high school. I got it right before the year started, and I sort of had it all throughout that. I ended up taking it to college, which plays a role in the story here coming up. With high school, the getting arrested at the beginning of my freshman year, I thought was devastating. I thought it was going to be a thing that was the worst thing that ever happened to me, and it was that thing that was going to destroy me, and it was the thing I was ashamed about for a long, long time. But it's weird looking back on it with the eyes of age and wisdom, where in all honesty, I think it might have been one of the best things to have happened to me. And the reason being is I had two friends when I was in junior high, Mike and Mark, and we met in 6th grade, and we became inseparable throughout 6th, 7th, and 8th grade. They were the kids I hung out with nonstop. I had other friends, Eric, Tim, stuff like that, that I also hang out with. But it was Mike and Mark were my closest friends. They were the ones who I did everything with. And when I went to high school, my freshman year, Mark had an older sister, and she was several years older than us. And she threw parties on the weekend, and she made a lot of bad choices at these parties, and a lot of drinking, and a lot of the cool kids would go to them. And because Mark was her younger brother, she invited him. And she was like, hey, you know, the parents are gone this weekend, we're going to have a party, go ahead, you're more than welcome to come. She's like, bring a couple of friends, just don't hang out with us, you know, stay to the side and stuff like that, and it'd be great. And so Mark, my best friend, got a chance to go to these parties with all these really cool older kids. And Mike went. And they invited me. And I had the chance to go to these parties with all of the top echelon cool kids doing all those top echelon cool kid things. And I didn't go. And I didn't go for 3 reasons. One was the arrest. Because I'd been arrested as a freshman and I had this hanging over my head. I was paranoid about what that judge told me about going back in front of him again. And I knew going to these parties that sometimes the cops showed up. And if the cops showed up while I was there, even if I wasn't drinking, even if I was just there, that being at a place like that, I would end up going back to jail and I would end up getting in all this trouble. And I didn't want that to happen. And 2, I love my parents. And I got along with them pretty well. And my parents tried to raise me right. I know, I got arrested at 14 for shoplifting, but kids make dumb choices. And I think my parents did a pretty good job of raising me. And because of that, I didn't want to disappoint them. And they raised me not to go down that path. And so I chose not to for that too. But there was a 3rd reason, which is my family has bad issues with addiction. And addiction is a family thing. It runs through your blood. That's why some people can drink and only do it on occasion and not have it affect them. And other people, as soon as they start to drink, it becomes all they can think about. Some people can smoke a cigarette every once in a while and not have it be a thing. And other people, as soon as they start smoking, they start going down a pack a day. It's because it's in your blood. It's a thing that is, you are genetically have a tendency to be addicted or not. My family has a very strong tendency for addiction. I am, to this day, the only member of my family who has not been addicted to something. And it's one of the reasons why I cut back on pop, because I can feel my body get addicted to caffeine really quickly. My grandparents were both alcoholics growing up, horrible alcoholics. You couldn't be around them after 4 or 5 o'clock in the afternoon And I thought that was just normal and how grandparents were, but apparently it's not how grandparents are. That's how alcoholics are. My mom was addicted to cigarettes nonstop, and it was awful. My uncle was cocaine and marijuana, and I saw it even as a kid. My brother, at the time, was only in 7th grade, was not addicted to anything. But later on, he was. He went down another dark path, a story for another day. And so even as a freshman, I saw that. And I didn't know how addiction worked, and I didn't know how drinking and drugs necessarily affected you. But I was afraid that if I even touched them, that I would slide down that path, and I did not want to be like my grandparents. I did not want to be like my uncle. So because of that, I was a little afraid. But I'll be honest, I don't think I was a strong enough person. If I had not been arrested, if I had had the opportunity to go to these parties, I don't know if I would have said no. Because it was the parties that you see in movies. It was the parties that you dream about being invited to as a freshman that I was getting the invitations to. And I really, really wanted to be popular when I was in junior high in my freshman year. And I thought it was the biggest thing in the world. And here I got that invitation to go to those parties. And I'd love to tell you that I am a strong enough person and I am confident enough that I would have stepped back and said, no, I'm not going to do it. But I don't know if I was. And because I never had to make that choice, it's not an answer I'll ever know. Now I am. I'm confident and strong enough. It's not an issue. But 14-year-old me, no. What gave me the power to say no was the fact that I'd been arrested. As weird as that is. The fact that when I got invited, I would say I can't go because I've been arrested. And there was no hard feelings. I mean, Mike and Mark didn't hate me for it. They're like, dude, we understand. I mean, absolutely, it's not a problem. And so I couldn't go down that same path as them because I'd made these choices. But if I hadn't been arrested, I don't know if I could have done that. Which is a weird thing, because if I had gone down the same path with them, they didn't end up in good places. I'm still friends with them via social media, but they didn't go on to do great things with their life. And I don't know if I would have gone to college. I don't know if I would have been a teacher. I don't know if I'd be here in front of you today if I hadn't been arrested. And it's weird to think that this thing I thought was awful made me become the person I am today.
There's stories. The snuff kids.
Eugenics. To go along those same lines, that was then, this is now, with Mark and Brian. And I've talked about how their friendship and how they go two different directions and they separate. That happened with my friends and I, with Mark and Mike and myself. These were my best friends throughout all of junior high that I was the super closest to. But the problem is, we separated and we went two different directions. And it wasn't because that they were angry at me or mad at me, but they went to the parties and I didn't. And what happened was we sat at the same lunch table. And when we came back, I'm going to have to move you. Sorry. It's just distracting. I've been trying to just let it go, but I'm going to move you over there just because if not, I cannot focus. I'm trying to. I don't want to be mean to you, and so it's the same thing. I'm going to move you over to here just to make it easier on me. So thank you. So with Mike and Mark, we would show up at the lunchroom because we were sat at the same lunch table because we've been friends forever. And sitting at the same lunch table, their conversations went to the idea of parties. And they were like, hey, did you see what happened at the party? Did you see what happened to Lucy? Can you believe she did that? And I was like, Lucy who? And like, oh, that girl over there. I'm like, okay. But I didn't know these people. I didn't go to the parties. And so we started drifting apart and going in two different directions, where theirs became a life of the party and who was at the party and the popular kids. And mine wasn't. And it wasn't a matter of them not liking me. It was just a matter of we didn't have the same things in common. And so I drifted towards friends I did have things in common with. So I started going towards friends who didn't drink because I couldn't drink. And so I made other good friends. Friends who I'm friends with today, and I don't regret that, but it was painful seeing that my choices were killing my friendship. And these kids who were the biggest part of my life for 3 years were no longer a part of my life because I went down that path of choosing not to drink. But I made it all 4 years without drinking and doing drugs, and a lot of it was because of that arrest, because it gave me that strength to make it to my 18th birthday, which was at the end of my senior year. And I made it to my 18th birthday, and my record got expunged, which means that they wiped it clean. I never officially went back to check it, which I thought about doing a number of times, of going to the police station, like, my name is David Brovicast, is my record clean? But I didn't want to, because I thought that'd be weird. And I was honestly, afraid they'd say, nope, it's still on there. It goes until the end of it. So I didn't want to find out. So I was like, you know what? We'll just pretend that I'm not going to have to worry about it. Made it to my 18th birthday. Quick side note. 41 years old right now. And I only have 2 birthdays I really remember. My 13th and my 18th. My 13th because it was when I was friends with Mike and Mark. And I had a friend, Tim, and a friend, Eric. And I love my parents, and they were great people. And I remember it was for my 13th birthday, we went to a drive-in movie theater, and we saw Batman, the one with Michael Keaton, the very first one that came out, and it was great. We had a fun time. And after the movie, we went to the grocery store, and my mom gave me $30 and said, you can buy whatever you want to eat. The only thing is it all has to be gone by tomorrow morning. And so we went in there and spent $30 on chips and frozen pizzas and pop and candy, and it was the greatest thing in the world. And we rented a whole bunch of video games and stayed up all night, and that is that memory I have. And those are the friends that I hung out with, and it was the greatest thing in the world. And my other birthday was my 18th. And I didn't celebrate it by going out and doing stupid things necessarily, but once again, I love my parents. Throughout high school, I enjoyed high school. I know a lot of people don't, but oddly enough, I did. I found myself in high school. I found out how to be confident and how to know who I am, and I made a lot of friends throughout of it, and it was a good time. And I owe a lot of that to my parents, which we'll talk more about tomorrow. But for my 18th birthday, my mom rented a gorilla suit, and I was driving home from school, and she was at the entrance to my neighborhood wearing a gorilla suit and holding a giant sign that said, "Happy Birthday, David Brovicast," and she was dancing in a gorilla suit as I drove by. And then she ran and jumped in a car and had my dad drive while she stood up through the top of the sunroof, dancing in a gorilla suit, following me through the neighborhood. And that's just sort of the family I come from. And we got to the house, and it turns out my mom rented a giant bounce house for my 18th birthday, because that's what you do for an 18-year-old, and invited my friends over, and we had a giant wrestling mosh fighting pit, and we beat the holy crap out of each other for the next 5 hours until we could barely move. And it was one of the best birthdays I've ever had, which is weird to think of all the birthdays. That's the one that stuck with me, and it was absolutely beautiful. Oh, and there was cake, because we'd take a break to eat cake and get all sugared up and run back out there again, and it was awesome. So anyway, made it to 18. Life is good. And I'm going down to IU. Don't really know what I'm going to do down at IU, but if you've not watched enough TV shows and movies and stuff like that, I was going to go live in a dorm. And a dorm is like a giant apartment complex, but each apartment is only one room, and you get to share it with one other person. That's your roommate. And I was rooming with my best friend, Eric, who I started hanging out with after Mike, and I separated. Eric was the friend that he and I gravitated. We both hung out, had similar families and stuff like that. And so we went down to this dorm called Wilkie, which is at IU. We lived on the 11th floor, and he and I were there together. And a dorm floor is like 30 of these rooms where you all have a roommate, and you just sort of hang out there together, and you get to meet everyone else on the floor. You know?
Was it a coincidence that you guys were in the same room, or did you?
No, good question. We chose. A lot of times when you go to college, you can either choose to have your roommate, or you can do random. And he and I both chose to hang. We were best friends. We're still best friends today. Once in a while, you just find that perfect friend. And so we chose to hang out together, and it was great. And so I also brought my car down with me to IU, which is not an easy thing to do, because, especially, I don't know about Ball State, but at IU, you can't really bring your car down there because there aren't enough parking spots for it. I mean, this is the entire parking lot for like 1,000 people that live there, and there's just simply not enough room. So you don't get to bring your car down. But I did, because I camped out to get a parking pass. And there's like this special pass you got that you had to buy each year, and it allowed you to park on campus. But they only had like 200 of them. It was like the first 200 in line. So I had to camp out overnight to get this parking pass, which I did, which I was all super excited about. So I got to bring my car. This is my RX-7 I brought down. Super excited. Car was great. My parents, when I was in high school, I got $1,000 to do research and find whatever car I wanted to try and get. And so I did research and found this sports car, which was a little tapped out and beaten up, but I thought the chicks would dig it, and it turns out they did. And it was great. The only drawback to it is it was a two-seater. So you had the driver's seat, a passenger seat, and that's it. The back of it was a hatchback, so it was like this big glass door that opened, and it was just flat. And so you could put groceries and stuff like that in there, which was great, except I had friends. And whenever I drove, friends wanted to come with me. So we would just put them in the back of it like a clown car. We would pop open the back, and I would have 3 friends jump into the back of it, and then we would just sort of close it. You'd be like, yee, hee, hee, and it would click like, and it would click shut, and all the heads would pop out like right next to us driving, and it was great. Incredibly illegal, incredibly stupid, and incredibly dangerous. But when you're kids, you're not going to die, so life is fun. And so that's what we took around. That's the car that I took to college with me. In college, I learned in high school to be friendly and outgoing. It's not my natural personality, but I picked up on it in high school. So in college, I was friendly and outgoing on my dorm floor. Whenever someone needed a car, I would offer to drive them. If you needed to go to the grocery store, you either had to walk, take the bus, or come find Brovicast. If you were going to the movies, walk, take a bus, or come find me. And they would be like, hey, can you drive? I'm like, absolutely. If I wasn't doing anything, I would drive you. We'd have conversations and talk. I got to meet tons of people. I just loved interacting with people. It's sort of what helped me become the teacher that I am. Went wonderfully. Got to the point of early November. This is almost exactly 4 years to the date of my previous arrest. And there's a birthday coming up for a friend of mine, Mo Simmons, who lives on the same dorm floor. Sorry, hiccup. And Mo was going to be turning 19. He was a year older than us, and he was living on the dorm floor. And I still did not drink. Throughout all of this, throughout the summertime, going into college, I'd been in college for a little bit here. And because I went through all of high school not drinking, I just was not a drinky type of person. And so because of that, when I got there, I just didn't drink. I went to parties still. When you get to college, you get invited to all kinds of parties. And now I'd go to them, and I figured my record was clean, so I wasn't going to have to worry about it too much. But whenever people would offer, like, I can't. I've been arrested before. And that just became like that thing I would say, and like, oh, really? I'm like, yeah, you know, I've got a record. I can't drink. And so it made it much easier on me. So my friends didn't harass me about it. And for them, they loved it because I was a designated driver. They would go out, and they would make poor choices. They would get drunk, and then I would drive them. They're like, this is the greatest thing in the world. And I was like, hey, I'm not drinking, and I'm fine with it, so we were all happy. Mo's birthday's coming up. And a friend of ours named Fish, who lived on the same floor, his name was Joshua Fisher, so Fish. Fish was like, hey, Brovicast. And he comes to find me one day. He goes, we're going to throw a big birthday party for Mo. And I'm like, sounds great. When is it? He's like, it's coming up on this Friday. And I'm like, oh, well, there's a dance coming up. And there's this girl I wanted to see there, and so I was kind of going to go to the dance with this girl. And he's like, well, it's all right. He's like, I didn't think you'd be able to come to it anyway, because we're going to have a whole bunch of beer there, and I don't know how you feel about it. And I'm like, oh, perfect. And I'm like, oh, I'm sorry, I'm going to miss the party. And he's like, it's all right. You can still get Mo a present. And I'm like, what is it? He's like, well, we've been collecting a whole bunch of money together to go out and buy a bunch of beer for the party. And I'm like, oh. I was like, I can give you some money. He's like, I don't want money. I'm like, what do you want? He goes, well, here's the thing. I've collected all the money, and he pulled out this fat stack of cash. He was like, and I've got a guy who's 21 who's going to buy it for us. There's a 21-year-old who lives on our dorm floor who was like a transfer student, and so he lived down at the end. He was a real nice guy. He was like, and he's going to go out and buy it. And I'm like, okay. He goes, the problem is I don't have a car to go out and buy it, so I need to borrow your car. One of the issues with IU, I'm not sure it's an issue, one of the things about IU is the fact that it's a dry campus. And what that means is you can't have alcohol anywhere on the campus regardless of how old you are. Me being 41, if I were to walk onto that campus and having alcohol with me, I would get arrested for it because you can't have it anywhere on there. It's just completely banned. They were planning on going out and buying as much beer as they could and bringing it back up to their dorm floor and then bringing it up there and having that party. And I was like, ooh, that's incredibly stupid, and I'm glad I'm not going to be there. But they needed my car to get it, to bring it up to the dorm. So now I have a choice in front of me. Because if I say no, my friend Mo doesn't get to have his birthday party. Because they were planning on it, and this was the only car, because he knew they didn't want to do it, so he'd gone to everybody, and was like the last person. And so if I say no, no party. If I say yes, I'm giving him my car keys. This kid that I don't completely trust, with this other kid I don't really know, to go do an illegal activity. And I'm like, that doesn't strike me as the best of ideas. So I'm stuck between these two choices, and he's like, so, can you? And I come up with a third option. I go, all right, how about this? He goes, yeah? I go, I can't let you borrow my car, Fish. I'm sorry. I'm like, my parents would just kill me, and I'm more afraid of them than I are of you. He goes, oh, man. I'm like, but how about this? I don't want Mo's party to not happen because I love Mo. He's a great guy. So how about I drive you guys? He goes, really? I was like, yeah. I was like, that way I know nothing bad is going to happen to my car. I'm not going to the party anyway. I'll drive you guys around, and then when we get back, I'll just head out to my dance, and then you guys will be fine. He's like, oh, that's so nice of you. I'm like, yeah, I'm trying here. It's cool. So it was a Friday night. We waited until it got dark out because it was November, so it was only like 6 o'clock in the evening. And so he comes to get me this fat wad of cash and the 21-year-old, and we head down to my car. I'm driving. The 21-year-old sits in the passenger seat, and then Fish sits in the little hatchback area. We just sort of put him in there, like, and then throw him down there. And we had a giant bag we were going to put all the beer in, and we had a blanket that was back there. And so we started driving around to the liquor stores. The problem is the liquor stores try to prevent you from buying a whole bunch of alcohol because there's no reason to buy a whole bunch of alcohol. So you can only buy 2 cases at a time. If you ever bought like Mountain Dew or Coke, that case, like that 20, that's a case. You can only buy 2 of them at a store because they stop you from it. Well, that was not nearly enough for his stack of cash. So we would stop at a store, and the 21-year-old would go inside. I sat outside because not 21. Fish sat outside, not 21. We're both 18. We just sort of sat there looking not suspicious until the 21-year-old would come out, open the back, put the beer in the back of it, and then he'd throw the blanket over it, and we'd drive to the next one. We did this like 4 or 5 times, driving from one stop to the next. Each time we stop, I'm more and more sure that we're going to have someone, because all it would take was for like one cop to walk by and go, "Are you sitting there with beer in your car?" And I'd be like, "Ah!" And I'd just take off running. So like every time I was like, "It's going to happen, it's going to happen, it's going to happen." We drive to the next one, like, "Okay, I made it. It's going to happen, it's going to happen, it's going to happen." And so eventually I get freaked out. I'm like, "I can't take it anymore." I'm like, "We just got to go." And he's like, "All right, we have enough." And so we threw it in the back. It was so much, my car literally, the back end of it was down lower to the ground. I mean, you could feel it as I drove, like, and I'm like, we have to get this out of my car. It was like, we look so suspicious. And so we headed back to the dorm. And I'm like, I cannot wait to get away from this. The faster, like, I've made it this far, something bad's going to happen, I have to get away from it. And so we pull up to my dorm. This is the one where I lived. I'm on the 11th floor. And then we parked over in this area, found a parking spot. I don't remember exactly, it was somewhere, I just know it was here. And so I pulled in with my trunk facing out this way and popped the back of it. And they go over there and they start taking out the cans and putting them into this giant hockey bag. If you don't know what a hockey bag is, it's a duffel bag that you can fit a body inside. They are humongous. And they're putting them all in there and they're planning on just like lugging it and carrying it out there. Not suspicious at all. But I'm like, I don't want to be anywhere near this because that is such a bad idea. So I come up with a genius thought. I go, "Hey, why don't I run up to the floor and get the other guys, and they'll come down here to help you so it's faster, and that way you can sort of split it among all of you." They're like, "Oh, that's really nice of you." And I'm like, "Yeah, nice. Not because I'm trying to get away from the piles of alcohol." I'm like, "I'll run up," and they go, "All right." So I take off and head, there's an elevator down over here we used to take up, so I'm taking off across, and I remember I got from the sidewalk and was going across this green area, and as I was walking across, from over in this area, flashlight. 2 flashlights pop on. Snap, snap. And I can feel the lights hitting me. And I thought it was weird, but I kept taking a few more steps when a voice to my left goes, "Hey, where are you going?" And I'm like, "To my dorm." Obviously, right here in front. And they're like, "Well, hey, wait up a minute." And I keep walking. I go, "No." And they go, "Hey, stop walking." And I sort of like stop, and I look over, and the lights go off, and it's 2 police officers just walking by. As I find out later, apparently on the weekends, they just send police officers walking around the dorms expecting to find kids doing stupid stuff. Because apparently kids do stupid stuff. And so they were just walking by and just saw me. And so they turned the flashlights on. I sort of stopped. I'm like, "So what's up?" And they're like, "So is that your car over there?" I sort of look back over my shoulder. I'm like, "Yeah, I was just dropping off 2 friends and then heading up to my dorm. So I'm just going to a dance." So I'm like, and I try to keep walking. I go, "Hey, let's go take a look at your car." And I was like, "No?" And they're like, "Come on." And I was like, "Oh, they're cops. I don't know what to do." So I go, "Okay." And I turned back around. Luckily, the 21-year-old and Fish heard all of this. So being the quick thinkers that they were, in the back of the car, they had taken the rug or the blanket and thrown it over all the beer and shut the back of it, and were just leaning nonchalantly on the back of it, as you do at 8 o'clock at night in a parking lot. And they're just like, "Hey, how are you guys doing?" as we come walking up. And the cops walking, like, "Hey, gentlemen." I'm like, "Hey, how you doing, officers?" And they turn their lights on, and once again, my trunk is glass. So there's nothing to prevent them from seeing in it when they shine their flashlights in there. And all they see is this giant, lumpy blanket. And they shine their flashlights in there, and they go, "Hey, what's under the blanket?" To which I, being the smart person I am, reply with, "Car stuff." Nailed it. And they go, oh, really? And I go, can we see the car stuff? And I go, no. Because I've seen cop shows, and I know how this works. So I go, no, you cannot. And they go, well, why don't you open it up? Because we're really curious about your car stuff. And I go, no? Because now I'm not as confident. And they go, all right, why don't we give you two choices? And I go, okay. They go, choice one, you come over here and you open up the trunk and you lift it up and you pull back the blanket and we get to take a look at all this car stuff. I go, uh-huh. And the other one? And they go, well, the other option is we're going to stand right here behind your car so that you can't go anywhere. And then we're going to call a tow truck. And the tow truck's going to come and it's going to tow you all the way down to the police station. And at the police station, we're going to have a locksmith come out and they're going to break into the back of your car. And once it's open, we're going to lift up the blanket and then we're going to take a look at all the car stuff. And as long as it's just car stuff, we'll bring your car back and apologize. But if it's anything except car stuff, we're going to come back here, and then we're going to come up to your dorm, and we're going to arrest you. And then we're going to charge you fines for the tow truck. And then we're going to charge you fines for the locksmith. Which one would you like? And I was like, let me guess. This one is me getting arrested right now. This one is me getting arrested an hour and a half from now, and then getting to pay a whole bunch of money in fines. Both of them end with me being arrested. I wasn't happy with either option. But at least one of them was slightly less expensive. So, one of the toughest things I've done in my life, I pulled out my car key, and I put it in the back, and I popped it. Cop looks over, lifts up the back of it, throws back the blanket, and I still remember it to this day. He throws it back, and both he and the cop next to him both step back and go, oh, Jesus, when they looked at it. That's not a good sound. There was no way it was an, oh, Jesus, we're going to let you go free. That was a bad, oh, Jesus. And they both looked at each other, and they looked over at the three of us, and they go, whose car is this? I honestly considered not claiming my car and just dropping the car keys and being like, I don't know, and just walking away and just wondering what would happen. The drawback to that was twofold. One, I kind of liked my car, but more than that, I was scared of my parents. And so I did not want to go home and be like, yeah, my car's just gone. Let's not ask any questions. I did not see that conversation going a good path. So I go, before I even got a chance to respond, that was with the 21-year-old and Fish both turned and go, it's his. And they both pointed to me. And that's when I had that thought about not claiming it. But I did. I go, that's my car, officer. And he goes, oh. And the officers both turned to Fish and the 21-year-old. And they go, gentlemen, you're free to go.
What?
That was my thought. I was like, bah! And my mouth open. I'm like, me too. And apparently, possession is what counts. Because they had not lifted it out of the car and were walking with it. If they had, they would have possessed it. They would have been the ones in trouble. But because it was sitting in the car, and the car belonged to me, I was in possession. So if the cops had shown up merely 2 minutes later, they would have been in possession, and this would have been a whole different story. But because it was in my car, I got the possession. Well, Fish and the 21-year-old looked at the cops and went, really? And the cop goes, unless you want to stay. And they took off so fast, little dust clouds went and formed behind them like in a cartoon, and they sprinted. And the cop turned to me and he goes, son, you're under arrest. And I was like, are you kidding me? And they put the handcuffs on, turned me around, went behind my back, stuff like that, read me my rights. And if you've never had handcuffs put on you, one, congratulations. They are not comfortable. It is a hard thing to describe, literally, until you've had it done, because they are hard and cold and pinchy in ways that I cannot describe. Where they snap down and they hurt bones that you didn't even not know you had until it hits them. And usually when the police put them on you, they're not in a good mood, so they're not trying to be nice to you. It was a very unpleasant sensation. And so they sat me down with my hands behind my back, on the curb, which is right next to the little car here, and I could look up and see my dorm. And they started taking all the beer out of the back of my car and putting it out on the road, and they shut the back of it, stuff like that. And I just remember sitting there, staring up and looking at my dorm. And about 5 minutes after the two took off, lights started coming on the 11th floor, which is the floor I lived on. And you could say, like, snap on, snap on, snap on. And then all these faces started appearing up there in the windows that I could see up there. And it was all my friends who were going to the party that night, and they were all up there just staring down at me. And then, as friends do, they start like dancing and waving and stuff like that because they're not going to get in trouble. And of course, they couldn't see me waving back saying, "You're number one," but I was, at least here. And then eventually, the police car showed up because these were just cops on foot, and so they called an actual car to come in. And the car showed up, and they moved all the beer over to the trunk of the police car. And I remember they said something at the time, like I'd set a record, like this is a record, kid. Whatever I went, it was like 350 cans of beer somewhere in North Valley. It was some incredible amount. Of like, for one person, this is a lot. I'm like, it's not for me. I don't drink. Like, sure you don't, kid. I don't either. Wink, wink. I'm like, ah. That was so frustrating. And they put me into the back of the cop car. And this cop car was different than the first one. One, I had to sit in the back. I didn't get to sit in the front seat. And the back seat was hard plastic, like the chairs you're in. It was not cloth, which I thought was weird. So I remember I sat down, my hands were behind me. And I remember as I sat down, like, these are plastic. And I remember saying that out loud. And the cop goes, "You're not going to throw up, are you?" And I was like, "No." He's like, seats make it easier if you do. And I was like, oh, that's kind of genius. And I looked down, and there's like a little drain in the floor, like you could unscrew. Because apparently college kids drink and then throw up in the back of the cop car. And so that way they can just like take a hose and go and spray the whole thing out, and it drains out through the drain. And I was like, oh, ingenious. Also, in the back of the chair, like where your butt would go, there was a little like cutout like a bunny tail, which I thought was weird. Because I sat down, I'm like, what that? And I'm like, oh, my hands went into it. Because my hands were behind my back, and that way you don't sit on your hands when you sit down. I'm like, I could like move my little hands like, I'd move my hands down there. It was kind of fun. So they drove me to the police station. Being 18, they didn't have to contact my parents. And I remember I had to get fingerprinted. It's a little rollie of the fingerprints. I don't know if I did that when I was 14. I don't remember. I definitely got fingerprinted at my 18. And I also got the little thing where you get the hold up little picture, the thing right there, and they take the picture of you. I had that done also. I do not have that picture. I have no desire to get that picture. I'm pretty sure it's gone by now because it was years ago. And then they like ran my name, and apparently I did not have a record because it did disappear. So I was all excited because I was afraid they were like, "And you got arrested when you were 14," but it didn't. It wasn't there. So yay on that one. And then being 18, they just kicked me out, and they said, "All right, you're done. Head on back." And so I didn't have my car because it was still at the dorm, so I had to walk home, and it was like 5 miles. It took me all like hours to walk home. I could have called somebody, but I wasn't in the mood to talk to anybody. I was just like, life sucks, so I just walked home like Charlie Brown, like the whole way. And I got back, and Moe's party didn't happen because there was no alcohol. And so I was like, I ended up ruining Moe's party anyway, so yay. And I remember just going back and laying down on the bed. I didn't go to the dance that night because I really was not in the mood to go try and ask out a girl. I was like, who's going to want to go out with me now? I've been arrested twice. Yay. So I just laid on my bed and stared at the ceiling and felt depressed and went to classes the next week. About 2 weeks later, we had Thanksgiving break. And I knew I was going to have to tell my parents because I had not told them yet. And I was not looking forward to breaking this to them. And so I got home for Thanksgiving, and I sat down with my parents, and I was like, hey, we need to talk. And they go, what's up? And I go, a couple weeks ago, I got arrested down at college. And they're like, what'd you do? And I go, I got arrested for possession of alcohol. I had 350 cans of beer on me. And they were not happy, to say the least. But it wasn't for getting arrested. It was for the alcohol. Because as I mentioned, my family has a history with addiction. And my family thought I was going down that path because they thought it was coming. Because it happened to everyone in my family. And so because of that, they decided they were going to put me in rehab because of it, even though I didn't drink. And so I started trying, because my parents are a psychiatrist and a psychiatric nurse. And I was like, listen, I don't drink. It was like, it was for a friend's party. It was like, I still don't drink at all. And they didn't believe me. And my mom, I still remember to this day, she said, honey, you have to admit you have a problem before we can get you help. And I said, I don't have a problem. I was like, I don't drink at all. Like, I still don't drink. And she goes, denying it's only making it worse. And I was like, I'm like, how do I convince you of? And so the only way I could do it was inviting over my friends who they'd known for years, Eric Brown, who I started hanging out with after Mike and Mark and stuff like that, and who was my roommate down at college. And so I invited Eric over and some other friends. And I was like, listen to him. And they made me leave the room while they interrogated my friends. And my friends convinced them, they're like, no, he doesn't drink. Like, none of us drink right now. He's just an idiot. My parents were like, he's just stupid? They're like, yeah, he's just stupid. And they're like, oh, thank God. And it was a weird sensation knowing that my parents were just excited that I was stupid, and not the fact that I was an alcoholic. So, yay on that one. And so we get to laugh about it now. But the drawback is, even though I was able to convince my parents I didn't drink, you can't convince the courts. And when you're 18 and get arrested for an alcohol possession charge, you go to rehab, whether you like it or not. And so I had to go to alcohol rehab classes, even though I had not drank at all, ever in my entire life. And they were scary, because the alcohol rehab classes I went to were down in Bloomington. And they were with people who were not college kids. They were with adult people, old adult people, 30s, 40s, and 50s, whose lives were not in good places. And I remember this lady who, my very first one, I came in there and it was at this courthouse, and I came in, I sat down like all these rows, and all these people were scared with like teeth missing and their clothes undone, and none of them looked like they were in good place. I'm like, you all scared me. It was like just sort of like curling into a ball, just sitting there. And this lady came in to my right and came down the row and like looks around for a seat. The whole place has empty seats. And she walks over and sits down right next to me. I'm like, oh God. So like I try to like lean away from it, and she smells awful. And she looks over at me and she's like, what are you here for, honey? And I'm like, I got arrested for alcohol possession, but I don't drink. She goes, I don't drink either. I was like, oh God. And she was like, I'm in, except for last night, of course. I was like, what? She was like, last night I was drinking tequila. It's called tequila because it'll kill you every time. And I'm like, oh God, stop talking, stop talking. And then she just was going on about, she was like, well, it's all right, because last night I passed out, but it was like a couple alleys over, and so it was close enough for me to get here right now, so it's my lucky day. And I'm like, it's not mine, it's not mine, it's not mine. And so she scared me. And so that was sort of what kept me making good choices for a while, because I did not want to end up like that. Tomorrow, we go a whole different direction.